front of me. Okay, so Rinpoche started by quoting from J. Rinpoche, talking about the importance of, first of all, generating the mind of bodhicitta, the very essence of all the Dharma practice, and having generated in that, requesting blessings to be able to engage in all the training of the bodhisattvas. When we talk about the training of these bodhisattvas, this is very well presented in this work, the 37 practices of the bodhisattvas, which was the originally intended text for these teachings. However, if we take into consideration the time that we only have 2 days of teachings, today and Wednesday, and then for each session, the last half hour will be questions and answers. And this actually limits our time that we have, and therefore Rinpoche was saying he will not be able to go through every verse of the text. However, he will emphasize the important points, and we will cover the essence of what is explained here. So, as we say, we have 2 days of teachings here in the center, and then following this, we have 3 days of the Grand Puja. And during those 3 days, what we will receive is 3 jenangs. So the jenangs, or subsequent permissions, fall in the category of Tantra. And in order to receive either a full empowerment or a jenang, it is very important to, first of all, establish the preliminaries. And the preliminaries for Tantra is to train in the common path, which is to talk about renunciation, bodhicitta, and correct view. And these are things that we will establish here in the center before we go into the jenangs. So, as we say, for a jenang or for any practice, sort of like bestowing of any tantric practice, there are many preliminaries and there are many prerequisites, but the main is what we know as the 3 principal aspects of the path. And therefore, Rinpoche would like to, in a short way, he would like to definitely establish this. Okay, all right, so let's talk about our own teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, who came into this world. First of all, he generated the mind of bodhicitta, trained for a very long time, engaged, established or obtained the state of Buddhahood, and from that point onwards engaged in activities to benefit countless sentient beings. He was born in this world in the land of Lumbini. Okay, so he was born to Lumbini, he was born to the royal family, and therefore he was raised in the royal household with all the responsibilities and the lifestyle that came with this. He remained in the palace in this type of life for 29 years, but then there were a series of events that made him witness the 4 types of suffering, the suffering of aging, sickness, birth, aging, sickness, and death. And that had a profound effect on him that really made him relinquish and completely turn away from the royal duties, the responsibilities, and that lifestyle. But basically, he had to escape from the palace. He left. Having escaped from the palace, he sought to engage in a pure lifestyle of practicing the Dharma. He became ordained and engaged in intensive activities. He spent 6 years in the river close to Bodh Gaya, Jalandhara, where he practiced austerities. And finally, at the end of that period, at the age of 32, he manifested the state of enlightenment. So having manifested the state of enlightenment at the age of 32, soon after that he was requested by all the great gods, such as Brahma and Indra, to please teach, and therefore he engaged in the activity of turning the wheel of Dharma. We know this is systematized or presented as the 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma. The first one, turning the wheel of Dharma, teaching about about characteristics. The second one, turning the wheel of Dharma of lack of identity. And the third, turning of the wheel of Dharma, which is of fine discrimination. So from the age of 32 that he obtained enlightenment, he remained active teaching and benefiting countless sentient beings for the next 46 years. And finally, he manifested the state of passing into paranirvana at the age of 84 years. So with this presentation, we actually present the enlightened activities of the Buddha within one lifetime. However, we have to keep in mind that the usual presentation is not like this, because when we talk about the enlightened activities, they span over a very long period of time. We start counting from the point that they generate the mind of enlightenment, and then it takes 3 countless great eons to accumulate, to train and accumulate the necessary merit and wisdom until they reach the state of Buddhahood. So obviously, because of the span of 3 countless great eons, this is not something that fits within one lifetime. Okay, so of course, for our teacher Buddha Shakyamuni, there are many texts that record his previous incarnations when he generated the mind of enlightenment, and we have 7 versions of that, 7 instances of that. So, as I say, we have various accounts in different texts describing the previous life, the previous lives of the being who belongs to the same mind stream with Buddha Shakyamuni, and the accounts agree on on which life he first generated the mind of bodhicitta. So at this point, the being who belongs in the same mind stream has taken a rebirth in the hell, and his duty as a hell being, together with another companion, were to pull a very heavy, heavy chariot. Okay. Because this is in the hell environment, you have to understand that everything is extremely difficult. So the ground on which they have to walk and pull this very heavy vehicle is blazing with fire. The vehicle that they have to pull is extremely heavy. It is strapped on their bodies with metal. Everything which is metal in a blazing environment is also very hot. So all in all, it was extremely difficult task to pull that cart along. And the companion who was pulling next to that being was very weak, and he couldn't actually pull his weight. And he had kind of like fallen down, and he could not pull anymore. And at this point, a guardian of the hell, who was there to, impose discipline and make everyone just get along with the task, came and was particularly cruel to the weaker companion. And at this point, the being who was in the same mind stream with Buddha Shakyamuni, he saw his companion suffering so much, and he generated compassion. So it is said that was the first time he generated compassion in a rebirth as a hell being. So he turned and said to the hell guardian, "Please release him. I alone will carry the burden of this cart. Please give him a break." But then at this point, having generated the mind of bodhicitta, that was the time for him to be released from the hell rebirth. How it happened was that the guardian of the hell guardian turned around with a very heavy club and hit him on the head. And by hitting him on the head, that was the end of his. He passed away. He finished with the hell existence. Okay, so. As we say, many texts say that this was the occasion in which that being generated bodhicitta. However, there are other texts that say, no, strictly speaking, that he didn't generate bodhicitta. At that point, he generated compassion. And later on, he generated bodhicitta through relying on the method of equalizing and exchanging self for others. So we can find a very good presentation of this method of equalizing, how to generate bodhicitta by equalizing and exchanging self for others in the sutric presentation, the sutric tradition. Okay, so this actually comes from the story of what is called the dear daughter. That's the name of the story. So the story of the dear daughter, okay, was like this. Again, we are talking about, that was the name that was given to the being who belongs into the same mind stream with Buddha Shakyamuni. Although he was called, in that particular time, he was called dear daughter, he was actually born as a boy. So there is discussion, or there are different versions why he was called dear daughter. One version says was because when he was born, although he was a boy, it was extremely beautiful, right? And therefore they said dear daughter, like beautiful as a girl, like, you know, that it had feminine soft beauty. So dear daughter. Another version of the story is that the couple, the father and the mother, actually had previously given birth to a boy, the first boy, and he died. Then they gave birth to a second boy. The second boy died also. So when they gave birth now to the third boy, it was sort of like a superstition or a way to make sure that it would not die as a boy. So they named it. They gave it a girl's name, so dear daughter. Okay, however, okay, so there are these two versions, but it seems the first one is the predominant. It was very beautiful. Okay, the father of the beautiful daughter, all right? So the father was a businessman. And back then, when we say businessman, how these people would generate wealth would be they would travel, they would cross the ocean, and they would find precious gems. So in one of those trips, the father died. So the father died when the child was quite young. But obviously, since the father died in one of those trips across the ocean, the child was asking the mother, what happened to my father? You know, where has he gone? Why hasn't he not come back? The mother did not want to tell the story that your father was a merchant and his job was to cross the ocean and travel in the sea and go and seek for jewels, because she thought that this might influence the child, and the child might also aspire to become like his father and, you know, take out to the sea, which was very dangerous. And therefore the mother concealed this story. She just said, your father was a merchant, but she didn't mention anything about crossing the ocean or looking for jewels or anything adventurous like that. Okay, so there was so they had that tradition in the family that whatever profit they had from their business, they would give to the mother, right? So the mother was the one who would keep, let's say, the wealth or the profit, and that was given with the instruction, practice generosity, you know, this extra money, give it to the poor, give it to the needy. Okay, so there was, as the boy was growing up, he associated with other merchants, and there was quite a lot of talk. There was talk about his father, then there was talk about what he will do, what he would follow, what was the best type of merchandise or trading, a line of trading he should get into to get the biggest benefit, the biggest return. What was the safest, and so forth. At the same time, remember that there were these deposits of profit that were given to the mother, and that money was accumulating and was growing. And that drew a lot of There were a lot of, within the merchant club, there were people who were getting jealous about this wealth, or maybe there were people who were, didn't like their father who had passed away, and they were not friendly either to the mother nor to, the orphan, the young boy. So there was a bit, that situation was developing. So the association of merchants did not really welcome the boy, kind of kept him aside, and there were more and more remarks about his father. So eventually remember the mother did not want to tell him that your father was going across the ocean looking for gems and so forth. However, one day, one of the other merchants spilled out the whole story. He said, well, what are you going to do with your life? What are you going to trade with? Your father used to be a merchant who would travel across the ocean and find jewels. So what are you going to do? It was almost like a challenge. And that was the first time the boy heard the whole story about his father, what had happened to his father. So he went to his mother and said, well, I was told that my father was actually a merchant who would go across the ocean looking for gems, and this is how he died. And he said, but I have decided I would follow my father's footstep. I will do the same. The mother would say said, no way. I do not allow you. I do not want you to go into the ocean because this is dangerous. So the mother prohibited the son to go to the ocean, but he actually wanted to go. And he had decided that he was going to go against her will. Now, the mother had developed this habit of sleeping in front of the door, so that he was blocking the door at night. But he was so intent on going that he stepped over the body of his mother. It's even the stories like they even kicked her head to get out of the door, to go to the sea. So he was not going alone. There were other merchants who were willing to go, so they were going as a group and they had their own boat. However, keep in mind that the boats back then were not seaworthy the way that they are today. They were not safe. They were very flimsy vessels, and they had to cross open sea. There were many dangerous creatures in the sea, so a voyage like this had a lot of obstacles. It was very dangerous. Okay, so they tried to cross the sea with that flimsy boat, and of course the boat capsized. It was destroyed. However, the protagonist of the story managed to survive, and he found a plank, a piece of wood that was floating, and managed to reach a shore, a seashore. So he arrived in this land, and this land was inhabited by gods and goddesses. And 4 goddesses invited him to the place and offered an amazing amount and very delicious food. The first time he was invited for lunch by 4 goddesses. And then after he left their place and walked a little bit further inland, he was invited a second time, this time by 8 goddesses. After that, he went further down and he was invited by 16 goddesses. And then he went further down and he was invited by 32 goddesses. Okay, so these numbers of 4 becoming 8, becoming 16, becoming 32 is actually the number. So remember how the mother was receiving the profit, and that the profit was increasing from 4 to 8 to 16 to 32. And with this money, he was practicing generosity. All right, so now the son was receiving food and invitations from 4, 8, 16, 32 goddesses. And this is a result that we see maturing within the same lifetime. This is a particular type of karma that we see within the same lifetime. When you make, or when you create karma to a very potent field of merit or object of merit, then you can see the results very quickly in this life. Okay, so he was, as we say, he was entertained for a while. He was invited by 32 gods and goddesses for meals and entertainment. After a while, he left and he moved further down in this land. And he saw a building that was made out of metal. And he could hear some awful cries coming out of this building. So he approached and entered. When he entered, automatically the doors of the building closed behind him. And then he went inside, he went further into the building, and he saw a second building made of metal. And he entered in there because he could hear, this is where the sound, all these cries were coming from. So he goes into the second house, and he saw a person who had a metal wheel that was spinning and eating away and cutting the head, and had reached to inside within the brain. And so that wheel was spinning, and, whatever it was doing in the brain was very painful. So he could hear those amazing cries of agony of that person. So he approached that person and asked him, what did you do? And that now has brought upon you the result of so much suffering. And that person said, when I was born as a human, I didn't listen at all to my mother's wishes. And when he heard that, immediately it hit him, because of course he had gone against his mother's will. And he thought, now this is my time. The karma I have created now will catch up with me. I will have to experience that. And as he had that thought, he heard this voice coming from the sky, and the voice said, may the one who is bound be freed. May the one who is freed now be bound. And as those words were spoken, the wheel, that metal wheel, moved from the person that was afflicted and came into his head. Okay, so as that wheel came into his head and started spinning, cutting through his brain, he experienced incredible suffering. But at that time also he generated the thought, and he said, how many others apart myself are there who have created such negative karma by not listening to the wishes or the advice of their mother? How many others are there, countless sentient beings who are like myself, who have accumulated all this negative karma, and they will also have to experience suffering like the one that I'm experiencing. So by myself experiencing this suffering right now, may they be free from their suffering. May they don't have to experience that karma. May their karma be purified. So at this point, he generated this special intention. And by generating the thought, the will was removed from his head. He passed away. He died at this point, but he was born in the God realm of 33. Okay, so this is the story, which is called the story of the dear daughter, the beautiful daughter, that shows us the lifetime or the story when our teacher Buddha Shakyamuni first generated the mind of bodhicitta through the practice of equalizing and exchanging self for others. So the Buddha himself has actually explained in the sutra that when you meditate on these special, very, very virtuous states of mind, such as compassion, special intention, bodhicitta, you purify a lot of negativity. The two stories that we gave, first of all, how the being who was of the same continuum with Buddha Shakyamuni was first born as a hell being, and this is where first generated that very compassionate thought towards his companion. And then the hell guardian hit him on the head with a hammer or a club, and he passed away. So he was the one who was then born as the dear daughter, right? And again, in this life, he had the wheel cutting through his brain and experiencing all this suffering. But this is when he generated this special intention. And as the Buddha has said himself in the sutra, these stories indicate very clearly that when you engage, when you generate this type of mind, that purifies a lot of negativity. The thing is that once you're born in the hell realm, the lifespan there is extremely long. And your life doesn't finish so quickly. The life of suffering doesn't finish so quickly because a guardian hacks you, hits you on the head. It doesn't finish. You have to live a very long life of suffering. So the mere fact that he died immediately when he received that blow on the head, and in addition he was born in the God realm, that actually indicates the great purification. So also if we look at the story of Master Asanga, who was in retreat for 12 years, and the aim of his retreat was he wanted to have a vision of Protector Maitreya. So it was a very difficult retreat because for 12 years he didn't have any sign, he didn't have any vision. After 12 years in retreat, he kind of gave up. He said, that's enough. All right, that's the end of the retreat. It was unsuccessful. And he left the cave and was coming down the hill. And coming down the hill, he saw this dog who was in a very pitiful state. It had wounds, open wounds in her body. It had maggots eating on the wounds. And he generated great compassion for that dog. So he wanted to do something for the dog. So the dog was crying. So he thought, okay, I have to remove the maggots. But if I remove the maggots from her body, they won't have anything to eat. So he cut a piece of his own flesh to put it there as food for the maggots. But then he said, okay, now I have to transfer the maggots from her body to this piece of flesh. And how am I going to transfer the maggots? So he thought, I will stick out my tongue and pick them up with my tongue. And, he closed his eyes and stuck his tongue out and came closer and closer to the body. But then he couldn't find anything. So he opened up his eyes, and there was Protector Maitreya right in front of him. So what happened was that, again, by generating compassion, he removed all these obscurations, all these karmic obscurations of negativity. So now suddenly he could see Protector Maitreya, which he couldn't see for 12 years. And he turned and said to Protector Maitreya, where have you been for 12 years? I was meditating on you, and you appear now, the last day I left the retreat. And Protector Maitreya said, I was there with you, in the cave next to you, from the very first day. But because of your karmic obscurations, you could not see me. Today that you generated this compassion for the dog, you remove all these karmic obscurations. So today you can see me. We also have reference of that in Bodhisattva's Ways of Life by Master Shantideva, where it says, merely meditating for an instant on this precious mind of bodhicitta, it has the power to instantly eliminate masses of negativity, just like the fire at the end of the eon destroys everything. So we know at the end of the eon we have those intensive fires that burn and completely obliterate everything. So it just says even one moment of meditating on bodhicitta has the power to burn away all this negative karma. And similarly, in terms of accumulation of our merit, there is no other method that can accomplish this as easily and quickly as meditating on bodhicitta. So of those who have studied in Parchin will know this. There is mentioned there that the amount of virtue that here, such as Shariputra and Mangalyana and so forth, would accumulate over an eon, so let's say 100 years, right? Or you could say one life, okay? So the amount of virtue that would accumulate over this long time, it takes a bodhisattva simply one day to accumulate equal amount of virtue. And when we say it takes a bodhisattva, we are not talking about Arya bodhisattva, or we're not talking about bodhisattva on the 8th ground, on the 10th ground, like high bodhisattva. Even a bodhisattva on the path of accumulation. Just one day's activities will have the amount of virtue that will take 100 years to accumulate. Okay, so also we see in the biography of J. Rinpoche, there is an instant there that he refers to a dream he had. And in that dream, he dreamt of the first Dalai Lama, Gentun Drupa. And so the first Dalai Lama asked J. Rinpoche, in J. Rinpoche's dream, and he says, do you meditate on the method of equalizing and exchanging self for others? And J. Rinpoche was like, yes, I do. So in another dream, Lama Tsongkhapa appeared. It was in nature. In nature, he was Lama Tsongkhapa, but he appeared as Serap Sengye. And he gave the advice, and he said, the ultimate Dharma is bodhicitta, the ultimate view is emptiness, the ultimate Tantra is Guhya Samaja. So, as it said, the ultimate Dharma is bodhicitta. The ultimate view is emptiness, the ultimate Tantra is Guhya Samaja. So, it's very clear, the ultimate Dharma is bodhicitta. Also, at the very end, when Lama Tsongkhapa was very near to his death, the close disciples, such as Gyalse Tokme, Gyalse Dhamma Rinchen, and the very close disciples were around him. And they asked him, what is your legacy? What's the last instruction to leave to us? And he said, I've taught you everything. The last thing is just meditate on bodhicitta. So that was his last instruction. Also, if we look at His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, he emphasizes this, that I practice two things. I practice bodhicitta and I cultivate the view of emptiness. And in Bodh Gaya, he made the statement very clearly that he received teachings on bodhicitta from Kunu Lama Rinpoche, and he said, I practice the instruction for about 50, 60 years, and I generated it. So he's very clear about that. So you can see that what we have to emphasize, what we have to prioritize in our practice is the development of bodhicitta. All those things, bodhicitta, compassion, special intention, these are the things that are worthwhile developing. And we see it from the life of our teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni. By generating the mind of bodhicitta, this is how he entered the path, and then he progressed along the stages of the path and finally actualized the result. We see it very clearly in the life of Buddha Shakyamuni, we see it in the life of J. Rinpoche, we see it in the life of all the holy great beings in our tradition. This is the beginning of entering the path, and from that point onwards you develop. It's not something which is easy to develop. You will not see the results immediately, straight away. However, even if you generate something which is a similitude, somehow, it approximates, it's not the real thing, but something, begin with something, and then develop this as much as you can. Because along the way, the more you develop this, that thing purifies your negativity and helps you to easily build up your accumulation of merit. So then, through this process, that unrefined thing that you have, then you develop it and refine it to more properly approximate, come closer to the real bodhicitta. So this is the way everyone else has practiced. This is what we should be doing. So strictly speaking, when we talk about the mind of bodhicitta, is the mind that includes two types of aspirations. There is the aspiration to achieve one's own purpose and the aspiration to achieve the purpose of others. So both of those things need to be combined to talk about bodhicitta. So you're thinking about others, and you say, for the sake of sentient beings, may I reach a state of enlightenment to be able to take care, to benefit everyone. So when you say, may I, this is like you're making a dedication, may I. You could also express it in a different way, where it says, I will become enlightened for the sake of others, which indicates your special insight, your special intention. Or you could say, I wish to reach a state of enlightenment for the sake of others. So wouldn't it be nice if I actually completely removed all negativity, if I accumulated every possible good quality and reached that state of perfection for the sake of others? So initially, when we start with our practice, as we say, this mind is contrived. Contrived means we have to put a lot of effort. It's not the real thing. The uncontrived is what we want to have. Uncontrived bodhicitta means the thought arises automatically into your mind. It's ever present in your mind. So obviously that's very difficult to have. We don't have that in the beginning. So we start with the contrived. Contrived states are very important for us. So you wake up in the morning, and if you can dedicate a few minutes of meditation every day on this contrived, imperfect, whatever version of bodhicitta you can master, and you keep at it, because as Master Shantideva says, there's nothing that does not become easier with familiarity. So keep at it every day and develop the uncontrived so that it will become the real thing. So the root of bodhicitta is great compassion. And to develop great compassion, we really have to contemplate suffering. Now, if we want to develop compassion and think about suffering, we have a lot of examples. It's very good to begin with examples of things we can observe. There's a lot of suffering amongst animals, for example, and obviously a lot of suffering amongst humans. So if you take animals as the basis of your compassion, consider those animals that are to be slaughtered, to be killed, right? So whether it is whether it is chickens or whether it is cows or any animal that is taken to a slaughterhouse, for example, they are aware of death. There is a lot of panic amongst the animals when the culling begins. Actually, many times they are even they are mistreated. They hit the animals as they take them to be slaughtered. So there's additional anxiety. So you could these things you can see. Actually, you can see documentaries on those things. This you can witness. We can see that type of suffering. So it's very good for us to generate compassion. in terms of human suffering, unfortunately, right now, there are many places where there is active war happening. There are a lot of people who live with this incredible anxiety. They do not know if tomorrow they will be alive. And whilst they are alive today, they have to endure these incredible oppressive sounds, let's say bombing or bullets or tanks and so forth, that are very scary sounds. So just consider all this agony and the suffering, because as we say, to generate great compassion, you must consider suffering. It doesn't develop otherwise. We had a few stories, and we looked at biographies also that illustrate how to develop bodhicitta and the effects of bodhicitta. And we come now to the last, let's say, 20-25 minutes of the class. We can have some question and answer opportunity.
Anybody would like to ask a question, you can raise up your hands and I'll pass you the mic.
Good afternoon, Khen Rinpoche. Thank you so much for your teaching. I'll be going through dentist tomorrow, dental procedure, and I'm in intense fear. How do I use this experience to generate bodhicitta?
So what is happening tomorrow for you?
Root canal.
Oh, root canal.
Dentist, yes.
Oh, dentist.
How do I use this experience when I'm in intense fear and pain to generate bodhicitta into practice?
Okay, very good question. Also, Rinpoche, in the past, he can empathize with you. In the past, he had problem with his teeth. Okay, so first of all, it's a very good question. And the thing is that of course, it's understandable. You will have anxiety and you will worry that you're going to the dentist tomorrow. The thing is, through our life every day, we have to go through various experiences, good things, bad things. And it is very skillful if we can use these experiences to turn it into a Dharma activity. So let's say the general approach is this. You have to say, okay, tomorrow I have to go to the dentist, which is a very unpleasant experience. However, there are things that are much worse than this. Okay, so in the text, Entering the Middle Way, by Master Chandrakirti, there is a verse that says, Bodhisattvas, seeing the suffering of the beings in the hell realms, Bodhisattvas are able to offer their flesh. So this verse comes in the context of Bodhisattvas being at the point of practicing generosity with their own body. And of course, this is not something that comes easy. It comes with fear, but there's always the question, like, why you cannot do it. It's almost you are stingy or you're holding back from practicing generosity because you think it will be a painful experience. But if you do not practice generosity and you remain at the level you are, you can see that there are other types of rebirth, such as falling into the lower migrations, where you will have to experience much bigger suffering. So the message here is that you compare the amount of suffering that you experience right now with something much bigger. In your case, all right, this is a root canal. It is not a nice thing, but there are people who have operation. Let's say tomorrow we'll have an operation, like serious operation, okay? So compared to someone who has a major operation, a visit to the dentist is not such a big thing. And there are other people who have even more difficult procedures or bigger suffering or bigger difficulties. So if you compare your suffering with something which is bigger, it minimizes yours. Whilst if you don't do this, it's like, I am the only one who has to experience this incredible suffering of the root canal, the visit to the dentist, then it becomes very big. So that is not skillful. And the other thing to consider is that, first of all, you can afford to go to the dentist, and I'm sure the environment in the clinic is very hygienic and that you will receive very good care. So consider there are people who are very poor. They need perhaps the operation, a serious operation, but they cannot afford it. Or they go for an operation and it's a dodgy job in an unclean, unsafe environment, and these people will suffer much more. So, okay, and tomorrow when you're at the dentist and he's drilling and you're feeling very bad about it, you just think, how many others are like myself who have problems with their teeth, and how many others, countless others, who experience suffering other than teeth problems, and by myself experiencing today having to be here in my dentist, may their negativity, may their suffering be removed. And by having this thought, this will purify negativity, this will help you accumulate merit, just as we said with all the stories today. It's actually very good if we are able to immediately apply the Dharma that we hear today, right? You can see it is applicable, then it's very useful. Otherwise, if we cannot put it into practice, it's like we hear it, it stays in this room, we leave the room, and it's not applicable, right? It is true we face a lot of suffering and difficulties, both physically and mentally. But what is important is the way that we think, because the way we think in any one of those situations can make a difference. We can actually either make the situation worse or we can minimize the harm. Okay, so this is very true. The way that you think, the way that you process this situation can make a big difference. And we all have this capacity to think, compare this situation to something, make it smaller. And if we don't do this, it's like, let's say you have the physical suffering, and then you think in a particular way with your mind that you aggravate the situation, you make it worse mentally on top of the physical. So that's obviously we want to avoid this, and we want to use whatever understanding of Dharma we have to minimize.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Another question.
Thank you. Thank you, Rinpoche. Congratulations, Sim. You got blessing from everyone. Any other question? Yes.
Thank you, Rinpoche. I want to follow up on the story that Rinpoche had at the beginning when Buddha was in the hell realm and he was getting whipped by the hell master. And so he had so much compassion for the other chariot holder and said to give him compassion, and he got instead clubbed. And then he kind of disappeared from hell realm. And that saved him from hell realm himself. But it didn't help the chariot compassion. He might be in the next in queue. So my question is, yes, that helped him to go to the next realm. But what about
His friend.
His friend.
His companion.
He was left behind.
Yeah.
So I ask this in the context as witnessing a lot of suffering, end-of-life suffering. So no matter how much Tonglen and bodhicitta you generate, you can't sort of help those people around you, so it actually leads to more frustration. So what would Buddha do in that situation if he wasn't sort of exited from hell realm? I mean, he's still leaving his companions behind. So how to mitigate that frustration that he himself is saved, but the others aren't?
Mm-hmm. When we generate compassion, focusing on the suffering of others, there are two possibilities. In one case, it can benefit them. In another case, it does not benefit them. Okay, so it's like this. We generate compassion when we observe someone who is suffering. All right, this is how compassion is generated. And then when you become aware of the suffering of others, you say, oh no, they're suffering. Oh, this is horrible. And then the question is, what can I do to help? Like, do you have the capacity to remove the suffering of that person? Because in most cases, we do not have the capacity. If you have the means and the power to intervene and remove or reduce the suffering of others, once you have generated compassion, then you will intervene. And in this case, your compassion, you generating compassion, will benefit the other person. However, if you don't have that power, if you don't have that capacity, what can you do? You cannot do it. And this is why we say that our ultimate goal is to reach a state of Buddhahood in order to be able to benefit all sentient beings. Because right now we do not have the capacity. Our capacity to help others is very limited. So what we want to do is we want to increase this capacity. We want to have full capacity to intervene in every situation, to save every sentient being. And this is why we say, I want to become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. So it comes down to that point. Right, but we don't have this. We have to meditate on the path to increase our capacity. And in the story of the being who was in the same continuum with our teacher, back then when he was born as a hell being, he could not help his companion. He was not a Buddha yet. Right? He was a hell being. A hell being does not have the capacity to intervene. He couldn't protect. He couldn't remove his companion out of the hell realms. He didn't have that capacity at that point. He had not developed in the path enough. So we have to meditate on the path to create that capacity, the fullness of capacity. So this is also a very important point that we need to understand. We say when I reach the state of Buddhahood, a Buddha has the power to protect sentient beings. But how does the Buddha actually protect sentient beings? How does it freeze and protect sentient beings? That's a good point to understand. So as a Buddha, you have complete knowledge of the capacity, the mental predisposition, the inclination of each and every sentient being. And you know exactly what sort of suffering they experience, but also you know the causes of suffering. And at the same time, you understand perfectly the causes for happiness. So the way that the Buddha protects us is basically by teaching what is to be practiced and what is to be abandoned. So they tell us this is the cause of suffering. You should try to avoid it. You should try to eliminate it as much as possible. And this virtue is the cause of happiness. You should engage in this as much as possible. So this is the way that the Buddhas protect us. Otherwise, the Buddha cannot reach with his hand and, remove the suffering. The Buddha cannot transfer his realization from his mind to our mind. The Buddha has perfected compassion. If it was that simple, we would all be free from illness and suffering. It would be, we'd all be free and happy now. So it's important to understand how the Buddha protects, having this complete power. He protects by teaching what is to be practiced, what is to be abandoned.
Yes. Last question.
Any last questions? No, then Rinpoche, I have one. Somebody text me for the question. Can I gain bodhichitta from office politics? So this friend is saying, for example, when I outperform in the office and my other colleagues are jealous and they attack me every day until I'm forced to do office politics, can I gain enlightenment can I gain bodhicitta through office politics?
So yeah, it's unfortunately it's like this, especially if you do an important job, a big job, or whatever job. When you apply yourself to the job, situations like this arise, and this is a situation to practice Tonglen. So it's very important that we do our best when we engage in any activity, worldly activity, Dharma job, whatever your job is. Do your best according to your capacity and just be very honest, right? Just be yourself and be honest. Do the best that you can. And then very important to look at the root motivation. The root motivation will be to benefit others. So if you have that motivation and if you are honest and hardworking and you do the best according to your capacity, that will be very good, you know. So again, you see, it comes down to the root motivation, which is to benefit others. So again, the element of bodhicitta there in the motivation. And as we say, with a pure intention, a good motivation, you do yourself, you do the best that you can. So you do your job good to improve, to bring progress and to improve things. And actually, when you act like this, definitely people will be jealous of you. So the jealousy of others is a good sign that your work is a work that brings progress and improvement. This is when people will be jealous of you. All right, so that's a good sign. Okay, so it's just the way that you think makes all the difference. Yes, so you have to be patient, tolerate all that jealousy that comes. So, as we say, when we do our work properly, and actually the best we are in our job, there will be others who will criticize us, who will be jealous, and so forth. However, when others treat us in this way, with jealousy, this can be beneficial for us. It's beneficial in the sense that it makes us aware that they're looking at us with critical eyes, so we are very careful. And because we're going to be very careful, it means we will avoid making mistakes. We will not be careless. Because you know, if I put a foot wrongly here, they will criticize me immediately. So it's beneficial because it makes you more careful. On the other hand, when people praise us all the time, oh, that's such a good job, that's such a good job, this is not beneficial for us. First of all, it can inflate our pride, and secondly, it can make us careless, or it can make us think that even if I make a mistake, it will not register because they are praising me. All right? So that is not a good thing. So if you take all this into consideration, actually to be criticized or to be treated with jealousy and so forth is very good because it makes you focus on your work. It makes you improve your work because you're very careful with what you do. Another thing to keep in mind is that it's a human nature to criticize others, and it doesn't matter how good you are, even if you are perfect, you will be criticized. For example, our teacher Buddha Shakyamuni, he had the cousin Hlejin Devadatta, who was always criticizing him. Anything the Buddha did, Devadatta was there to criticize. So even the Buddha was criticized. So, why would it not happen to us in an ordinary environment, in the ordinary society? Of course, it's human nature. Okay, so there is, if others criticize you, do not be depressed, do not leave your job behind, because if you do this, they win, you don't win. And just, the best attitude is just be relaxed, have a relaxed, open mind, and that is the most beneficial.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Yeah.
I'm very happy, overseas, very happy friend now. Rinpoche shifted our perspective totally, so Thank you, Rinpoche.
Yeah. Yes. This the person who asks this question, they are asking out of actual experience, in an actually lived-in situation. And Rinpoche says, "Oh, we know so much about the experience of this person." we empathize. Rinpoche was saying he's very pleased. He didn't quite know what the audience will be like. That's his first teaching here. But he can see from people's expression that you have great interest, like you were nodding at the right places, and you ask. So it shows you are engaged as an audience. It shows that you have understanding, you have the intelligence to understand the teaching that was given, and then at the end you asked very, very good questions. So again, the questions are indicative of the level of engagement and the level of understanding. And therefore, Rinpoche was saying that he sees this as an extremely beneficial teaching, a great opportunity. And it's very good to see the Dharma being applied to an everyday situation, as the ones that we were discussing here today. And it's very good to start from a young age and continue. And obviously you're very engaged, intelligent audience and very beneficial interaction. And we have a great audience here of so many geshes and the ordained, and they're like the witnesses if we make any mistake or if we get it correct or wrong. They are right here witnessing all this. All right, so now all this root of virtue that the teacher and the students we have created in this way, it is very good to dedicate for the benefit of the teachings, for the benefit of sentient beings, for the benefit and long life and all the establishment of all the aims and goals of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, of all other holy beings, of the monastery, of the reincarnation of Lati Rinpoche, all his wishes be fulfilled. And in particular, because we were talking about how to generate bodhichitta today, may that be a cause to benefit all sentient beings. So the monks will lead us into prayers, and may we all join together and dedicate.
Now,